Hi. Okay, this is a new Nigeria with Olawale Oluwade. It's been a while, and going forward, my interventions on this platform will be intermittent. And the reason is simple. I've done this, I've devoted quality time in the past 5 years, 6 years, thereabouts. I can even say 10 years, talking, profiling solutions to the myriad of challenges confronting this beleaguered, country called Nigeria. And I'm not wired, to keep repeating the same things over and over without positive, change. I'm not wired to function in that manner. I don't know how to, ad nauseum, as it were, say the same things without seeing appreciable improvements. Now, as we slide into the next round of general elections, and I use the word elections advisedly, I would expect that the conversations around the candidacy of potential candidates for elections next year would focus on the critical issues that beset this country and has hobbled our march to greatness. But what do we have? What we have on the major media platforms, particularly television, is the topic, of zoning. Zoning has become, substitute for critical issues. So, leading TV platforms have made zoning to become the central, topic of conversation every day, talking about zoning, and this it's not even dangerous. It is quite sad and unfortunate, that the media platforms, the media establishment that ought to set agenda for politicians, is actually borrowing from the playbook of politicians who have nothing to offer this country and only resort to, their default, strategy of whipping up primordial sentiments, ethnicity, religion, tribalism, and all of that, and it's quite sad that the media establishment that ought to be, agenda setting, a great agent for change, has become part of the big problem confronting Nigeria. Now, I don't know how to be sentimental. I'm a deeply rational individual. I deal in facts, and evidence. So, if zoning principle was such a big issue, most of the heads of states under military or president of Nigeria since 1960, they've been from the north. And what's the condition of the north of Nigeria? President Buhari did 8 years from 2015 to 2023. What's the condition of the north? How did Buhari's presidency positively impact on the fortunes of northern Nigeria, let alone the whole of Nigeria, in terms of poverty eradication, in terms of out of school children, in terms of maternal and infant mortality rates, in terms of insecurity, in terms of agricultural outputs? I mean, Buhari's home state of Katsina is currently the epicenter of banditry, kidnapping, terrorism as I speak here. I mean, earlier last week, a terrible, heinous terrorist attack in a mosque happened in Katsina, Buhari's home state. So this kind of conversation, I think, does Nigeria great disservice. And those in the media establishments who are driving these conversations need to look themselves in the mirror and speak the truth to themselves. Now, what are the issues I think should drive the conversation for 2027 general elections? And this is an assumption, that the elections will be free, fair, and credible. That everybody who feels they are competent to lead and provide leadership for Nigeria at the presidential level, at the governorship level, in the National Assembly, and all of that, will be given an even playing field to offer themselves to the electorates. So, what are the issues? The interview I'm attaching here was done on a TV platform, November 2022. The issues I discussed therein have always been relevant to the success, the growth and development of our economy as Nigerians. It was relevant then, it is relevant now, and I dare say for the foreseeable future, these issues are going to be extremely relevant. Well, if we don't deal with these issues I adumbrated in this video, we're not going to go anywhere. We can talk about zoning. We'll still come back here after 50 years, 100 years. For those who are going to be here, we'll still be talking about zoning, while the rest of the civilized world are making great leaps, forward. Watch this video, and I bet you will not regret watching it. Bye.
The rise in poverty in any country is harmful to its citizens, and that's the reason eradicating extreme poverty for all everywhere by 2030 is a pivotal goal of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Regrettably, in Nigeria, despite the President Muhammadu Buhari-led administration's target of lifting 100 million Nigerians out of poverty over the next 10 years, a recent report showed that the reverse was the case. The report from the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics has revealed that no fewer than 133 Nigerians, representing 63% of population, are currently living in multidimensional poverty. As election nears, the inflation outlook is even grimmer as prices outpace earnings, pushing more into poverty. Nigeria's inflation rate jumped to a 17-year high of 21.09% in October 2022, representing 0.32% increase from 20.77% recorded in September. This is according to the NBS, that's National Bureau of Statistics, raising concerns for Nigerians already battling with weak household incomes and import pass-through costs. Joining us on the show this morning as we discuss the worsening food inflation and poverty levels and how to prefer solutions to it is Olawale Oluwade, CEO, Growth Masters Consulting. Welcome to the morning show.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much, Ayo. Good morning.
Well, Mr. Oluwade, how do we address this?
Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning. How do we address this poverty crisis, the poverty trap in which we have found ourselves? NBS says 133 million. In another report, Kingsley Moghalu and others claim that, in fact, the percentage of Nigerians who are in that poverty trap is over 90%. Inflation is 21.09%. Food inflation is over 23%. The CBN, the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, they say they are working on it. They have plans to prevent food inflation. But here we are. We're facing 2023. GDP growth is down to 2.25%. What can be done?
Thank you for that question, Doctor. Where the federal government got it wrong, number one, there is no philosophical underpinning behind whatever it is they were doing, all the several interventionist programs. Secondly, also, there is a lack of a grand vision, and I'll talk about that briefly. Thirdly, their interventionist policies also was not structured nor coordinated. And then fourthly, it wasn't also integrated into a holistic development plan. So I came up with a report, and also, if we have said in Nigeria that human resources are our greatest asset, so far the way we have treated our human resource, pardon my use of language, we've treated our human resource as trash. Anyway, so I came up with a study. I've studied this for a long time, and let me also quickly say before I even go right into my own solution, is that there are two strategic issues Nigeria has got to deal with if we're going to solve our economic crisis. Number one, our energy, crude oil industry has got to be dealt with once and for all. And that was what you were discussing before I came in. I have dealt with that. I have a show, I've dealt with that. I have my own thinking on that. Until that sector is totally privatized, we're not going to make a headway. We'll keep having this crisis in that sector. What countries who are rich in energy, in crude oil, what they've done with their energy monies is to diversify the economy, grow other sectors of the economy. What have we done? We've frittered our wealth away, over $1.5 trillion since 1958, when crude oil was first discovered in Oloibiri. Anyway, so the second issue that we need to deal with in Nigeria is this poverty crisis that we have on our hands. So my thinking is premised on 4 or 5 bases. Number one, what is the definition of poverty? The federal government has approached poverty as money out of pocket. So they give people handouts, market money, trader money, and all of that, you know. Poverty, in its definition, is a lack of access or lack of opportunity. Nigerians are migrating out of the country, you know, I mean, even here this morning, I asked after one of my friends here, he's already gone, you know, educated, skilled, but they're looking for opportunities in other havens that are conducive for human habitation. Number 2 reason is, okay, I also have a grand, you know, a vision. If I were, I mean, to run for office, for instance, I would say, okay, for Nigeria to exit this poverty crisis, we need to have a grand vision. And in my own case, I would say we need to attain self-sufficiency in certain areas. And then also, because nation building is a bottom-up approach, I would approach it from a bottom-up approach, meaning it will be integrated across the different tiers of our governance structure. Local government, in fact, go into the wards, go into the local government, to the states, and up, you know, to the federal government. You can't sit in Abuja and deal with poverty in the far-flung, you know, parts of Nigeria. And also, you know, treat our human resources truly as our assets. So now, back to the grand vision. If we're going to attain self-sufficiency in 6 key strategic areas. Number 1, food security. And you touched on it brilliantly, Doctor. We have high inflation. The largest sectoral contributor to inflation in Nigeria is the food sector. You know, we have 79 hectares of arable land in Nigeria. Guess what? Only 44% of that is cultivated. The remaining 56%, you know, is left habited has been taken over by bandits, terrorists, kidnappers, and all of that. Insecurity has driven, you know, farmers away from their farmlands. So you have spike, you know, in prices of foods, you know, and inflation is going up as a result. I mean, we have Nigerians going to bed daily without food. You know, why should a Nigerian, you know, go to bed without food? You know, we have children dying every hour in Nigeria. You know, 100 Nigerian child under 5s are dying every hour. Every day, that's 2,400 Nigerian children. Every month, that's 72,000 Nigerian children. Every year, that is 864,000 Nigerian children dying. And what are the causes of their death? Number 1, malnutrition. And then secondly, malaria disease. You know, so food is a major challenge that we have to deal with. We've got to focus on agriculture extensively. Secondly is education. We have, initially it used to be 13 or 15 million or 18 million. Now, way above World Bank projection, we have 20 million Nigerian children of school-going age out of school. 20 million Nigerian children out of school. You know, so without an educated citizenry, you know, how do we grow this economy? How do we build our nation? Now, when I talk about education, I'm not just talking about, you know, formal education. I'm also referring to skills, you know, access to vocational skills from that tender age. You know, I would mention the need to focus on that because China has done that successfully. Why did China lift, or how did they lift 850 million people out of poverty in 40 years? They focused aggressively on vocational education, having almost 12,000 vocational schools, enrolling in a year almost 31 million students, graduating 10 million per annum. You know, students in vocational skills. And I'll give you 3 examples, even from America. There are 3 companies in the world today in Silicon Valley. You know, the most capitalized company, the richest companies in the world today, Microsoft, Apple, and even Facebook. You know, the founders of these companies didn't finish university. They didn't go to university. They stopped at high school. You know, but guess what? Because they had skills in coding, in programming, in app development, they founded these companies, and guess where, you know, America is today because of the businesses, you know, they founded. You know, so number 3 is healthcare. You know, like I said, look at the number of children that we're losing every day in healthcare, in our health sector. I mean, between education and our healthcare industry, we're losing maybe close to $5 billion every year. Because part of what is putting pressure on our currency, that is currently exchanging at about 800 naira to $1, is because we're frittering away our resources. crude oil, like I touched on earlier, ought to be, giving us buffers against, whatever is going on in the international market, as other crude oil exporting countries are benefiting from. But we aren't benefiting from that because when we export, rather than the money coming to our economy to give strength and value to our currency, what do? We use it, from the other hand, to import PMS, diesel, and all of that. And so, today, the records bear witness that, we're not even getting anything in our system, from crude oil. So if we are going to stop health tourism, education tourism, we have to look inwards, attain self-sufficiency in food, in education, in healthcare. Number 4 is jobs. And for us to have jobs, we need to give skills to our people. The jobs of the future are targeted at people who have skills, commercially viable skills. People must have ability to work with their hands, and that brings me to the point of, we have to grow MSMEs sector, aggressively. Not this way we have done it. We have to put these MSMEs in clusters, in special economic zones, in hubs, and all of that. The next point is housing. To build this nation also, we need a master plan on housing, and not just housing where people live. We're talking about housing including what is inside.
Yes.
And then the final point, which is 6th, is creating a livable, safe, and secure environment for Nigerians. Now, if you have all of this, it's got to be tied to a 30 to 50-year national economic development master plan that is anchored on an aggressive, MSMEs incubation. And then you've got to target the sectors, ICT, agriculture, all industries and all of that. The areas where we're deficient, we need to target these MSMEs. And then we need to put them, like I said earlier, put them in sectors. And then the next point is funding.
All right.
They've got to be funded. There must be a law. Anyway, the next point is that there must be a law backing this up, because one of the things the law will do, and overarching legislation, is that we need to control population rates. At the rate we're going, it's estimated that by 2050, Nigeria will jump from our current population of 214, 215.
So a population explosion.
To 450.
It's
at
all
the rate we're going.
Yes.
And GDP is not growing. If we need to match up with that population growth, our GDP needs to be growing at double digit. But of course, we're going at 2.9, 3% or 3.1. And then we need legislation on funding this plan I just highlighted briefly.
Absolutely.
We need legislation on the sectors we need to target. We need legislation on, provision of dedicated infrastructure. When I hear maybe ministers of works and also say, we've built X number of roads, I need to say quickly that infrastructure in and of themselves do not add value to an economy if those infrastructures are not provided at the economic zones. The problem of Nigeria in a nutshell is that we're not producing. Our economy is woefully underperforming. We're not producing. So if we have infrastructure, the priority should be economic zones where there is production activity going on.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Oluwade.
Yes, I can see you want to...
Yes. Very well said. Thanks for highlighting. We can sense the passion with which you have conducted this, presented this report, and just looking at the outcome of your poverty eradication strategy. You have put in SMART goals, which, as you have highlighted, based on what you have identified as a way out of our poverty crisis here in Nigeria. Talking to education, indeed, in your report, you talked about learning poverty, which I'd like you to expound on in a few minutes, and also talk about the importance, the role that education plays. But beyond that, you highlighted lifting 10 million individuals out of poverty annually, removing 20 million out of school children from the streets in 1 year. These are grand ideas, and you've called them SMART. Are they truly achievable today?
Brilliant question, Ayo. The learning poverty, that's why the report from the NBS is called multidimensional poverty. Part of the poverty crisis we're facing in Nigeria is that we have, according to UNESCO, we have 10 under 10s in Nigeria. Under 10s, 70% of our under 10s who can't understand simple sentence of English nor handle, basic numeracy tests. Now, if you have under 10s, 70% of our under 10s with such deficient capacity, then of course, we have a crisis in our hands. Now, coming to the SMART goals, these are enumerated SMART goals devolve from the grand vision of attaining self-sufficiency in the key areas I earlier on highlighted. What has gone on in Nigeria is people coming out to say, like the federal government said, we're going to lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty in 10 years. I would have loved to see the data, the granular, research that was done before they arrived at that. From my own study, I could say we'll do this, lift 10 million Nigerians out of poverty annually. That is, in 13 years, we would have done 133. Now, coming to the 20 million Nigerian children out of school, like I earlier mentioned, let me tell you what I would do if I was running for president and I'm fortunate to have won. On day one, I would issue an executive order, and make a proclamation that in 1 year, we have to move these children out of the streets, put them in shelters in all their local governments or wards, across the states. That way, of course, there will be incentives for the states and local governments, a matching grant from the federal government, but we need to partner together. That is one of the gaps in the current system between the federal government. Federal government sits in Abuja, through the Office of Ministry of Disaster Management, and there may be one or two other offices, and they throw money at all these projects, school feeding, like I said, conditional cash transfer and all of that. But it's not achieving the results. The report from the NBS, they want 33 million Nigerians in extreme poverty. Guess what? 80% of them are in our rural areas. 107 million are in our rural areas. Only 27 million are in urban centers. So if we're going to achieve this, we've got to take these children off the streets, go back to their rural areas, to our local governments, our wards, and begin to build more primary schools. That's why I said we need to build, that we're going to build, we have 808,812 wards in Nigeria. So we will start with the local governments. So we build in 1 year 774 new primary schools. The second year, we'll replicate this, until we have 8,812 new schools, 8,812 primary health care centers. A country cannot grow and prosper if, 864,000 children are dying annually. That's your human resource. You can't grow that way. And like I said, two things kill them: lack of nutrition. Number two, lack of access to healthcare, because malaria parasite. So we need to build primary healthcare centers closest to the people, not in local governments. I've heard people tell me that they've lived in the local governments, they've not cited, a medical doctor in the entire existence of the local government. A minister for health in Nigeria, Professor Onyebuchi Chukwu, even validated that assertion, that there are communities in Nigeria that have never seen a nurse, least of all a medical doctor.
Mr. Oluwade, all of this, at first I'd like to ask, yes, are you running for president? Because you keep saying, if I was running for president. And secondly, all of this you have said, how much would this your plan cost? If I want to pay for it now, how much will it cost?
Beautiful question, Rufai. I'm not running for president, but I'm worried, because there are so many manifestos flying everywhere, and I've taken time to listen to most of the candidates. I've read through some of them, and what I see is approaching economic development in silos. So take, for instance, the federal government of Muhammadu Buhari has approached economic development purely from an infrastructural development point of view. And like I told you earlier on, Rufai, building infrastructure in and of itself without proper linkage to economic activity would not achieve anything. You can take that to the bank. If I was to call the MBS and other enumerating agencies from the federal government to give us the number of people employed by all the different programs done under this administration, it is pitiful, it is woeful. So if you're going to build infrastructure, so that's why I said if I was running. So I am saying this, I am putting this report out here, and appearing here to say there's an urgent need for these guys, those running for president, but not just president, governors, because we keep focusing on the president. Those running for governors to go back. I don't want to use the cliche, that to the drawing board. They need to go back to their team and come up with a plan. See, what is the definition of government? What is the role of government? The Constitution says the role and duties of government is the welfare and security of the people.
The question
what is welfare? Food, education,
Mr.
healthcare, housing, jobs, security. Let me answer the second one. You talked about funding.
Yeah.
You talked about funding.
No, I'm saying put a cost to it. How much would all of this you said cost?
Exactly. Well, when you talk about cost, it's a bit difficult, dicey to talk about cost because it's a landscape that is constantly shifting. As we're speaking here, 5-10 people have been thrown into the poverty pool since I arrived here.
So don't you have a cost for all these things you've said?
Let me tell you.
You don't have a cost for all these things you've said?
You said what?
You don't have a cost for all these things you've said you're going to do?
Rufai, I can give you an estimate. And interestingly, I had one of the presidential candidates say, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar say, he's going to give $10 billion US to women and children to deal with, most vulnerable in our society, to deal with poverty and all of that. For me, that would be a minimum threshold. If I was going to do this, if we're budgeting, say, the current budget is about $40 billion US. If we're going to do this, for me, that would achieve the needed, traction and results positively. We're talking about $20 billion US per annum. Now, talking about where would we get the money? We have lost those who are breaking crude oil pipelines and taking the money from source. Do you know how much they've stolen? Estimates say in the last 10 years we've lost $40 billion US. Since President Muhammad Buhari came, we have lost about $30 billion US, to crude oil theft. Now, if you add subsidy from 2019 at 350, 2020 it was 1.57 trillion, 2021 was 1.54 trillion. This year, subsidy budget is 4 trillion. Next year, it is estimated at 6 point some. Now, I listened to your earlier guest, and I agree entirely. That is a waste. That's corruption. So if you add up all the waste, the corruption, the leakages in a system, there are revenue generating agencies in Nigeria where you need to go see the benefits and perks and allowances that people working there take home every year. It is criminal. In fact, it's actually ungodly, because if you have people dying every day, children dying from malnutrition, from lack of access to health care, and you are giving people 50 million, 100 million, for car allowance every 3 years, that is criminal. So the money is available, Rufai, take that from me. It's just to do the right thing. And that's why I also worry.
So it's 20 billion.
Most of this presidential and governorship
hang on a minute. So it's $20 billion that will do all of this, and you're very sure of that cost. That is $20 billion that will build schools, 7474 local government.
This is going to be 1 year.
Give subvention, $20 billion every year.
This is not a 1 year program.
That will do all of those things. Are you sure?
Are you sure about that? $20 billion is not 1 year.
Or you want to still interrogate the cost?
Absolutely.
You will still interrogate it, Abi?
I'm telling you.
Okay, Mr. Oluwade.
Yes, we can definitely. We can interrogate it definitely.
Mr. Oluwade, all these ideas are not new.
Yes, Doctor.
I've been hearing about these same ideas since I've been in this public space, and I've been around here for decades. Okay? So the same thing, let's tackle education, let's solve the problem of oil and gas, let's provide security, the same things. It's the same things they say every time at the Economic Summit Group. It's the same ideas in the report I quoted earlier by Kingsley Moghalu and others. It's the same thing the MBS is saying. So if these ideas are not rocket science, if they are in your face kind of ideas, why is it that from one administration to the other, no administration has been able to tackle the challenge of poverty in Nigeria? In fact, it gets worse, and it's going to get worse even next year. Why do you think that is so? Where exactly is the problem?
I should tell you, Doctor, God bless you for that question. That's the $1 billion question. The reason is simple: lack of political will. Lack of political will. And I also worry, because that's why I worry more and I have sleepless nights, because most of those aspiring for political offices in Nigeria are not aspiring for office to serve. Public office is for service. Public office is not for self-aggrandizement. It is not for self-enrichment. It is not for self-fulfillment. It is not to say, I am contesting to fulfill a lifelong ambition. Governance, that's about seeking public office. Now, even the public, the apparatus to getting this done, the bureaucracy, is collapsed completely. Why? Because now we have a bureaucracy that does not understand the essence of governance. Everything we are talking about is about the failure, complete collapse of governance. So people want to become director, PAMSEC, deputy directors and all of that, to have access to the resources that is meant for the people. So governance has collapsed. Now, the resources that is meant for the many are being used to sustain a tiny elite. That is the failure, Doctor. And that's why, like I said, I worry on a number of reasons, but particularly that the people I am seeing running for office in Nigeria are interested in wearing agbada and branded caps, and the retinue of heads who worship at their feet. You can't build this country with those kind of people. Governance is actually a calling. You need people who are passionate about the lives, the livelihoods of the people to run for office. And then you need a civil service that is focused on doing their jobs. In other climes of the world, look at Qatar, for instance. We're watching, Qatar is not Europe or America. We're watching Qatar, Middle East. They have crude oil just like us. What have they done? Used to. Nations will build, World Cup preparation where they will spend 20 billion, 25 billion. Qatar has spent 200 billion to host this 4-yearly fiesta, because they managed their resources, prudently and efficiently. We frittered hours away. There is nothing to show since 1958 that crude oil was first discovered in Olobiri, in Bayelsa. There is nothing to show on ground commensurate to the colossal sums Nigeria has earned from crude oil revenues. So a few individuals, sit down, corner these resources for themselves and for their families and lackeys. That is the problem. That is the heart of the issue, Doctor. So we have, anyway, a rider is that in the beginning, when we started in the 60s, I know, Doctor, we used to have rolling plans, master plans. How can you grow a nation without a national master plan, economic master plan that is anchored, on your human resources? You can grow a nation in that manner. So every government comes, they are going their own different ways. This one comes, I want to do this, I want to do that. No. And let me also say, throw this in right quick. Some of these candidates, they talk like they're going to sit in office for 20 years. You only have 4 years. So if all you can do, I'm giving advice now, if some of these candidates, if you win, if all you can do as president is to deal with the monster of crude oil, failures since 1958, please focus on it. And let me give you a model. NLNG is a business model that has worked successfully in this country. That company, nobody even knows exists. It has generated revenues of $108 billion US in 21 years of its existence. And it has paid $35 billion in dividends to its shareholders. What's the secret to the NLNG business model success? 2 things. Number 1, ownership. Federal government only owns 49% in NLNG. The remainder, 51%, is owned by Shell, 25%, Total 15%, and Egypt 10%. Shell actually is 25.6 and Egypt 10.4. Total 15%. That's 51%. So for as long as this NNPC that we have right now, they did this event the other day, they gathered people together, called Asha to come and sing and serenade them. Even though she was telling them there's fire on the mountain, that joke seems lost on them. No matter how they do that rebranding, it will not work until federal government relinquish controlling stake in NNPC. We're not going anywhere. Secondly, is the competence. I've heard people say, go list the stock of NNPC on the stock exchange. That's not the way to go. Get core investors, put them into a bidding process like we did for the telecom sector. Get core investors to come and bid, and then sell this to them. Don't follow the path of the energy sector where we sold discos to cronies. And where are we? We keep having darkness all over the place. So, Doctor, like I said, your question was spot on. We need to have people with the right capacity, people beyond capacity and competence, people who are patriotic, who for the first time will put the interest of this country paramount above every other interest. How can you go to bed at night with 72,000 children dying? Is it a crime to be born a Nigerian?
All right, we hear
How do you have 133 million people living in extreme poverty?
Mr. Oluwade, we hear you.
It's wrong.
And
where does it happen?
And as you've mentioned, thank you, Mr. Oluwade, we hear you. And as you've rightly said, political will is definitely a big factor, which we haven't unfortunately seen. We have had a number of administrations, governments coming to say that they'd want to lift Nigerians out of poverty and marshal out a plan, unfortunately, not being able to execute in the time given to govern. However, I'd like us to look at perhaps the private sector. So we have looked at the government, what the government can do, interventions, you put a cost to it, and the timeline in your report. Let's talk about where the private sector comes in and how this can be used to lift people out of poverty. So, for instance, going back again to the education sector, remember the Adopt a School initiative, the public-private sort of partnership, and how that worked out in supporting public schools to be better. Are there other initiatives like this that private institutions can take on, men and women, organizations like yourself who are passionate about Nigeria and lifting people out of Nigeria who want to do their own bit? What are ways that they can come on board?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, private sector play a complementary role to government, in my view. What we have done, like you said, the education sector, what we have done, government has abdicated its constitutional responsibility in primary and secondary education to private sector, and that is wrong. It's criminal. I don't know about Rufai and yourself, Ayo, but I know Doctor and I went to public schools for primary and secondary schools. Everybody above 40 or 45 in Nigeria attended the best public education in Nigeria, primary, secondary. So the awful situation we have today where private sector completely took over primary and secondary education is a disaster because they are after profit motive. Education is not where you want private sector involvement. Please, we need to say that over and over again. Government is to serve the people. There are shared services that government is designed, is conceptualized to provide. Education is at the heart of this. Now, you talked about private sector. Also, I agree. And that's where the issue of MSMEs incubation comes from. And I earlier on touched on these companies. Apple. Apple is a private company, but it's the most capitalized American company worth value. The market capitalization of Apple currently is over $2 trillion. Private sector. If you take Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, Twitter, these are companies that give America almost $5 trillion of its entire $23 trillion GDP. So the focus of government is to create human resource that have skills, capable technical skills. And let me also say this, since you touched that question, Ayo. Now, education, like I said earlier on, is not just about going to school to go and get paper certificate that is worthless. People need to have skills. In China, that did the miracle that they did in 40 years, lifting 850 million people out of poverty, they have almost 12,000 vocational educational system. And from there, they developed 140 MSMEs. As of 2020, 140 million MSMEs, 140 million MSMEs, contributing 60% of Chinese GDP. Chinese GDP is about $14 trillion. MSMEs there contribute 60% of that. That's about 8.4 trillion. Ours here, we have about 39 million MSMEs, almost dead. I'm an SME, I know what I go through, and what are we contributing? 48% to GDP. What's our GDP? 440 billion. So we're contributing less than 220 billion annually. Now, so if you have MSMEs that are adequately funded, the people are skilled, and like I said earlier, you put these MSMEs in clusters, in industrial zones, in hubs, and you dedicate infrastructure there. See, this issue of dedicated infrastructure is so key, it's fundamental, because the analogy I can give that best illustrates it, if you fly, once you board, the pilot or whoever announces that, okay, should in case there's loss of cabin pressure due to turbulence or whatever, that you should, and the mask drops, you should put the mask on yourself, the adult. Even if you're carrying a baby, does it mean the pilot does not love the baby? No. But they know that you as an adult, you have enough sense, after having worn your face mask, to take precautionary steps to save the life of the baby. So we take infrastructure, roads, power, finance, we dedicate it to MSME clusters, special economic zones, industrial hubs, ICT tech hubs, because that's where we produce.
Yes.
MSME is responsible for 78% employment. In China, they are contributing almost 60% to export revenues. Beyond crude oil revenues here, and giving us dollars.
Thank you.
What else are we exporting, giving us revenues in dollars?
Thank you very much. Mr. Oluwade, very well said. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Mr. Olawale Oluwade, CEO, Growth Masters Consulting, here this morning on the morning show discussing eradicating poverty strategy.